Parts of the brain, video 1. Boop. Alright, so the brain is one of the largest organs in adults, approximately 3 pounds, but that will change from person to person. And the major divisions are the brainstem, which has the medulla oblongata, pons, midbrain, cerebellum, diencephalon, and the cerebrum. So during brain development, it starts as a single neural tube, which becomes your entire central nervous system. That tube will divide into 5 parts. Those 5 parts become those ventricles, which are those fluid-filled areas filled with cerebrospinal fluid, and then the tissue from that tube around those areas becomes the brain parts. It is those stem cell nerve cells differentiating into the neurons that they need to be. So if you look at this diagram of the brain, we have sagittal cut right through the hemispheres. We have our cerebrum. Cerebellum is this light blue portion, and then our brainstem is composed of our midbrain, our pons, and our medulla oblongata. Also right in the middle here we have what's called the diencephalon, which is composed of the thalamus, pineal body, and the hypothalamus. So the brainstem, composed of, we're going to start with the medulla oblongata. It is essentially in a large continuation of the spinal cord, and it attaches the brain to the spinal cord right above that foramen magnum, that hole in the bottom of the skull I showed you the other day. It controls your breathing, heart rate, activities of the gut through different centers. So the cardiac center increases or decreases heart rate. The vasomotor center will cause your blood vessels to contract or dilate depending on what you need to do to maintain homeostasis. And the respiratory center will regulate the heart, or the rate, the rhythm, and the depth of your breathing. So those are your vital reflexes. It also controls non-vital reflexes such as swallowing, yawning, hiccups, vomiting, coughing, sneezing. Part of the medulla oblongata is called the reticular formation, also called the reticular activating system. Now this is a network of nerve fibers, and it connects multiple areas of your brain with those ascending and descending tracts that we talked about the other day. So it activates your cerebral cortex, meaning it keeps you awake. When you sleep, that means you have decreased activity in your reticular formation. Someone who damages their medulla oblongata and their reticular formation will fall into what's called a coma. And then we also have a persistive vegetative state, which is you're perceiving what's happening to you, but you don't have that wakefulness because you damaged your medulla oblongata. Between the medulla and the midbrain, we have the pons. What the pons does is it's a message relay system. So it relays messages from your medulla oblongata to your cerebrum. It also helps to regulate the rate and depth of breathing, that respiratory center with the medulla oblongata. It's also your motor control, sensory analysis. Also, the last part of the midbrain, or brainstem, is we have the midbrain. The midbrain is above the pons, but below the cerebellum. It is that bulge. So you can see here we have this little blue bulge. It is controlling your auditory and visual centers. So it's the thing that's telling your eyes to move when your head moves, to move your head to hear things better. That is what the pons is controlling. It also controls your major motor tracts. So those reflex tracts that we were talking about through your spinal cord go through the pons to maintain motor function of your muscles. Next we have the cerebellum, second largest part of your brain. It has 2 hemispheres similar to the cerebrum. It is mostly white matter and some gray matter, and it creates this branch-like image if you cut through it here. So you see a lot of white matter and very little gray matter, and the gray matter is deeply folded into the white matter. The gray matter acts as the cerebral cortex, but it's called cerebellar cortex. So that just gray matter is cerebellar cortex. It controls your skeletal muscles for balance and posture. It also has a subconscious and an automatic processor for reflexes. It controls the position of your body parts, where you want those body parts to be, and then causes you to move your body in the desired way. So it has a lot of control over muscle coordination and movement. If you damage your cerebellum, it can cause tremors, inaccurate movement of voluntary muscles. You can lose muscle tone as a result of that. You can also lose your equilibrium, so you lose your center of gravity. That's my cat. Between the hemispheres of the cerebrum, so when you do a sagittal cut between the hemispheres, you can see the diencephalon. The diencephalon consists of the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the optic chiasma, and the pineal body. It also has portions of the pituitary gland and other glands there as well. So the thalamus is what receives all the impulses except for smell. And what it does is it will send it to the appropriate parts of the cerebral cortex, the gray matter of the cerebrum. Around the outside of your cerebrum in that gray matter, the sensory receptors for the different parts of your body are located in different areas. And I'll show you a diagram of that tomorrow. So it will send the impulse to the correct area so that you can respond appropriately. It also maintains your emotions of pleasant and unpleasantness so that you can respond accordingly. The hypothalamus, which is below the thalamus, it links your body and your mind. So it links your nervous system and your endocrine system so that you can maintain homeostasis through excretion of hormones from glands. So it controls your hunger, your body weight. It regulates and coordinates your autonomic activities, those automatic reflexes. It contains your water balance. It maintains your body temperature. It also maintains peristalsis, which is the movement and contraction of your stomach and your intestines so that you're moving food in and out of your body. The pineal body regulates your body's biological clock. It also produces some hormones such as melatonin. All right, now the cerebrum is the biggest part of the brain. The cerebral cortex, cerebral tracts, and the cerebral nuclei make up the cerebrum. 4 general functions is consciousness, language, emotions, and memory. So the gyri are bumps on the cerebrum, and sulci are shallow grooves. If you have a very deep groove, that is called a fissure. Fissure literally means cut. So we have a longitudinal fissure that divides the 2 hemispheres, a central sulcus that divides the frontal and parietal lobes, a lateral fissure that separates the temporal and parietal lobes, and then we have a parietal occipital fissure separating the occipital and parietal lobes. The outer layer, like I said, is made up of the cerebral cortex, which is the gray matter, which is the unmyelinated portions of neurons. There are right and left hemispheres. We'll talk about dominance in a few slides. And they're separated by the corpus callosum, which is a bundle of nerve fibers that connects the 2 hemispheres so they can communicate with each other. Each hemisphere has the 4 lobes. So there's the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. So the frontal lobe regulates your personality. So the prefrontal, which is the very front part of your frontal lobe, is your personality. So that's can you adapt your personality to different events and experiences? Do you have foresight? Can you imagine? Do you have a sense of self? It also is responsible for your concentrations, your planning, problem solving, judging consequences, and moving voluntary muscles. It's also where your Broca's area is found, which is where you are able to produce speech, which is different from your Wernicke's, because your Wernicke's is, can you interpret speech? So in your parietal lobe, this is your main sense area. So it's where you're sensing temperature, touch, pressure, pain, anything involving the skin. It's also responsible for understanding speech. Using words to express your thoughts and your feelings. If you have lesions here, which means cuts, it can cause sensory loss. So you lose that sense of temperature or pressure. The temporal lobe is your main hearing center. So it interprets your experiences, remembers visual scenes, music, and other patterns. It's also involved with your cognition, your emotions, memories, and this is where your Wernicke's is found. So your Broca's area was found in the frontal lobe. The Wernicke's is found in the temporal lobe, and this is where you comprehend speech. We have the occipital lobe, which is your vision center. It's where you combine your visual images and all your other sense experiences. So what are you feeling, what are you smelling, what are you hearing, and respond accordingly. It's also involved in your eye movement so that you are looking where you need to look. So the limbic system, it is a set of brain structures, so it's not just one structure, it's a system of structures. It involves the corpus callosum, which was that bundle of nerve fibers connecting the right and left hemispheres. It also includes your hippocampus, which is your long-term memory, and your amygdala, which is your area responsible for your reward, your fear, and your mating responses. It's in control of your emotions, behaviors, long-term memories, and your olfaction, your sensory, mostly your smelling. It causes you to modify your behaviors based on past experiences. So if you're having an experience, it will cause you to feel pleasant or unpleasantness based on your past experiences, causing you to behave accordingly to increase survival. So you know when you're in a dangerous situation and you know when you're not in a dangerous situation. It controls your fight or flight response. So we talked a little bit about hemisphere dominance and how there's a myth about I'm more right hemisphered or I'm more left-brained or right-brained. So there is a dominance to your hemispheres, but both hemispheres are always working equally. It's just one is controlling more because the messages are relayed there more. So your left hemisphere is more responsible for language, dominates your hand movements. It's really all about speech, writing, reading, analytical, and computational skills. While your right hemisphere is more in tune with your spatial orientation, musical patterns, visual experience interpretation, and emotional and intuitive processes. While one hemisphere is dominant, that doesn't mean that you are a more logical or a more artsy person. It means that that side that is dominant will control the motor cortex more in the non-dominant side, or sensory information is relayed to the dominant hemisphere so that you can then integrate everything and make a decision. But it is a myth that people are more right-brained or left-brained because you are using both sides of your brain equally. So these are some examples of EEGs/ECGs, electroencephalograms, and I'm sure you've heard of these in EEG. So it is collecting data on your brain waves. And if you just look at them and kind of notice the differences between them, we're going to do an activity looking at EEGs in class. But it's mapping essentially the brain activity. So here's another one where you can see a normal EEG in comparison to someone having a seizure. And again, we're going to look at this in class. All right. Please write down any questions that you have. We'll go over them in class. Make sure that you do the Google form so I know that you watched this video. This was the first one, so it's a little weird, but we will get more comfortable with it. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to make these better. Mostly probably not being so monotone. So I will try my best, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.